Today, I would like to show you how you can completely automate your whole reporting process. So let's imagine that you have a slide like this, right? So this could be a Google slide or a PowerPoint presentation, whatever you prefer. And each and every one of those elements are going to be populated automatically based on what we are going to do. So each number, each kind of text, and even an executive summary, which is going to be AI generated, which gives a further explanation in textual form, right? What these numbers are going to mean and what kind of strategy you can basically take out of this. Then this specific file is also going to be stored on your Google Drive so that you always have access to it and can basically access to it when you need to present it yourself. And then finally, we are also going to send it as a PDF attachment to the according stakeholders. All right, this is what we're going to build. So let's get into this. All right, so I am within my n8n account right now, and I have created a new workflow. So this is a completely blank canvas. And the first thing that I need to do is to add a trigger node, right? And the one that I chose for this would definitely be the trigger, the schedule trigger, right? This would be the most appropriate so that, for instance, every day or every week, whatever setting you would prefer in this place right here is going to be the triggers so that the whole flow is going to be triggered in a regular interval, right? And I'm just going to set it to once a week, and then let's not take Sunday. Let's just say it's going to be Monday or whatever you prefer. And then let's say that this is going to be sent out at 8 a.m. every Monday. All right, perfect. Now, the next thing is that we need to get data first, right? So what data is this report going to be based upon, right? And I have prepared a really simple Google Sheet for this. As you can see, though, I just entered a date and then a couple of KPIs. So in this case, let's say we have a marketing campaign running, right? And this could come from Google Analytics or whatever platform you're using, right? And this is just some sample data. So we have the amount of clicks, we have the amount of spend, the money, we have the impressions and the conversion rate, right? And obviously this depends on your specific use case. Now I want to get that data right now. So what I'm going to do is to select the connector right here. I'm going to look for Google Sheets, and this is what I'm going to choose. And now I actually want to get a row and read that sheet, right? So what I want to do is to get the row right here. So I'm going to select get rows. Now this is going to be connected to my specific account. Obviously the resource that I want to interact with is the sheet within a document, right? So this is the document that we're dealing with, and I only have one sheet right here, which is just called sheet 1. And after this, I also am going to select the operation, which is to get rows, and the document is called just 024, right? This is what I call the doc. And then I have to select the sheet right here, and there's actually only one sheet, which is going to be sheet 1. Okay, perfect. So let's just execute this step and just see what happens. And here you can already see that the schedule trigger was also executed, right? So this obviously would run at the specific time that you have set up. And then this will get us all the data that we have within our sheet, right? So in this case, these are the 7 items that I have entered right here. Perfect. So the next step is actually already going to be AI based, right? So we want to already pass that data right into an LLM so that it is able to interpret that data and create an executive summary out of this, right? And obviously we are going to keep it extremely simple, right? We only have these kinds of KPIs. What you can obviously do is to throw in a lot more data, right? So that the summary at the end of the day will also have, you know, a little more depth in that regard. But for this case, this is going to be enough. So what I'm going to do is select the next node, and I'm going to jump into the AI section, and I'm going to scroll down to the basic LLM chain, which is sufficient for our case. Now, the basic LLM chain is a native n8n node, so it's not necessarily connected to a specific LLM provider, but that's also the beauty of it, because what you could also do as an alternative is that you used one of the proprietary systems from Anthropic, Gemini, or OpenAI. But what we want to do is to be kind of independent or from a specific email or from a specific LLM provider. So this is the reason why I'm going to choose the basic LLM chain, which is just a simple chain to prompt a large language model, right? So in simplified terms, this just means that we are going to send a prompt as a request, and we are going to get back a response from the according LLM, right? That's already it. So I'm going to select this one. And the source for the prompt that I'm going to use will not be the chat trigger node, right? So this would be unnecessary if we had a chat trigger as our trigger within the specific flow. But if I jump out of this, then you know, right? Then you've seen that we are using the schedule trigger. So what we need to do is to define the prompt where the this is actually supposed to be coming from as a source, right? So what I want to do is to use the define below option, and this enables me to add my prompt right into the user message itself, right? And this is exactly what I'm going to do. So I have prepared a prompt right here. So I'm going to paste this into this field, and I'm going to jump into this just so that we can have a better look. So this is going to be based on the following marketing KPIs: generate a short executive summary, 3 bullet point insights, and then 2 actionable recommendations, right? And then use the following format, and so on and so forth. And this will be the data that is coming from the previous node, right? And As you can see, these are not active right now, so there is no reference node because I have taken this out of a template, so I will need to redefine this basically. And this is quite simple, obviously, because the only thing that I need to do is to drag and drop the data from the previous node into the specific position where I want to have that, and then you can see that this will be actually populated and parsed into the specific value behind the according variable, right? So nothing special right here. Then I'm going to delete all of them, and I'm going to replace them with the according fields, just as you can see. So I'm going to do the same thing with the impression, and then finally also with the conversion. Delete this one and then pull in the conversion, and now you can see that we have a nice prompt right here. And obviously this is a very simple prompt, and you can extend this to your specific liking. All right, now the next thing that I need to do besides the prompt is obviously also to equip this specific basic LLM chain with a model, right? So in contrast to a couple of these AI nodes that have proprietary systems behind them, like Anthropic or OpenAI, which are already connected to a specific model, obviously, right, from that according provider based on the one that you select here. But again, we are using the basic LLM chain, which is LLM agnostic, if you will. So what I need to do is, if I click on a model right here, is to select one of the providers that I have right here, right, and then create a connection by entering my API key so that I can use the according model behind this. Now, the one that I'm going to use is OpenRouter, and if you're not familiar with OpenRouter is basically just a unified interface. This is also how they are positioning themselves, a unified interface for LLMs, which basically enables you with just one connection to OpenRouter itself, by just using OpenRouter's API key to use any kind of model that is currently present on the market, right, if you will. So this means that you have access to all the proprietary systems that are out there, to the proprietary LLMs, but also to the open source ones, also to the free ones, right? And depending on the specific use case that you have, one or the other might be more appropriate, right? So this depends on your specific case. All right, I'm going to close this one. This is now connected to my OpenRouter account, obviously, and then I am able to select any of these models that I seem appropriate, right? That I think would be the best one for this case. All right, so I'm just going to take a GPT-5, let's just say mini right here, and this should be sufficient for this specific case. I also am going to rename this node right here so that I just know what model I chose, and this is already it, right? So let's already take the first items and just see what it outputs. Now, before I do this, actually, just for testing purposes, there's another node that I want to use, which is quite convenient for testing, and I'm going to put this right between the Google Sheet node and the AI node right here, which is called limit. And this is extremely simple, right? So this gives me the possibility to only accept the X amount of items that are coming in, right? So I just want to use the first item that I have received from the specific sheet, right? So this is just going to be the very first one right here, and this is already it, just to test if this specific LLM node is actually working the way I expect it to, right? And then obviously after the whole flow is done and it is going to go into production, right? I'm going to publish it and it's going to be live. Then I'm obviously going to deactivate or delete the specific node to pass all items through it. All right, so let's just see what happens right now. So I'm going to execute the flow again from the top, and let's just see what happens. So this is now working, and we are, as you can see, only working with the very first item right here, right? So as you can see, we have 7 items incoming into the limit node, and then we have 1 item coming out of this, and now the AI is working. All right, and now it's done, and I'm going to open up the node right here, and now you can see that it is actually giving me the content that I asked it to, right? Remember that I gave it the requirement that I want to have an output like this, and this is also what it adhered to. Now, as you can see, however, the output that I received is, first of all bundled into one cohesive text of string, right? So into the complete text, so that I'm basically not able to interact with any of these items individually, right? Because obviously I later on want to use the reported title, for instance, the report title separately. I want to use the KPI separately, right? But I'm not able to access them. Now, the reason for this is that I need to require a specific output format by toggling this button right here. And this is exactly what I'm going to do. So I'm going to activate this toggle. And at the time I do this, you can see that it added an output parser at the very bottom, right? So if I close this again, then you can see that I have a second connector right now besides the model one. And what this enables me to do is to get into the output parser selection, and there are 3 options. However, the first one is already deprecated, so I wouldn't advise you to use this one. But the default one, if you are working with these kinds of system, usually is the structured output parser. And what this enables you, if you click on this again, is that the LLM is actually going to be outputting a very specific output format, which is then later on also going to be parsed into their individual items, right, into their individual variables, so that I am able to access them individually. And this is exactly what I'm going to do. Now, what I need to do for this is obviously to also define a schema. Now, there are two options within the schema type selection. The first one is to generate this from a JSON example, right? And this is the default setting. What you can also do is that you would define a specific schema, right? And the difference between those two options is basically just that the example kind of hints the LLM what it is kind of expecting, but this is just an example. It's not as strict, right? But if you use the second option, then it really has to adhere to each and every one of those structural items that you have defined yourself, right? And this is what I'm going to do because I want to be sure that it is going to adhere to this very specific format. All right, so let's jump back into the canvas and I'm going to execute this step again, and let's just see if this changes anything. So I'm going to execute this and let's just see what happens. All right, perfect. Now it's done, and let's just see. We already see that it did use the output parser, so it kind of knows already what we're looking for. And if I open this up, then now you can see that it is actually adhering to the exact structure that I asked it to, right? So we have the report title separately, we have the date, the KPIs, and the AI summary separately, right? And now I can individually select these items and work with them in the subsequent nodes. Perfect. So now let's get further in the process. The next thing that I want to do is that I want to use a specific template from a Google slide that I have prepared, right, from a Google slide file. And the one that I choose is this one. So this is just a template, right? And as I've mentioned before, you can basically update and edit each and every one of those fields that you see right here, right? So whether it's the company name, whether it's the title, whether it's the page number, and also the date, so everything can be changed automatically. Now, what you would need to do for this is to use so-called placeholders, right? And I have used very simple ones, as you can see, because the only thing that you need to know right here, or where the AI is going to be looking for a specific term, is on this page. That's just the term summary, and then this is going to be set into these double curly braces, or the single curly braces rather, as you can see right here, right? So I have the term summary, and this is going to be wrapped into single curly braces like so. All right, and using this strategy, right, basically, or using this tactic, we can select any kind of field that we want to later on replace with real data everywhere, right? So if, for instance, in this case, we want to have all the spend numbers, right, from our sheets, just to remind you, these are the numbers that we need to populate the report with, right? And then I'm going to define a variable called spend, right? And you can call this whatever you prefer. And I have one called clicks, impressions, and then also conversions, right? And you can do this with every element that you have, right, on this slide right here, right? And you can even go on with this same tactic. Now, what this enables us is that we will later on replace these exact placeholders using a specific node from Google Slides itself, right? And I'm going to show you how this works in a second. Now, what we first want to do is that this is going to be our template, right? So I just called it in business report, right? And this is going to be our template. So what I want to do is create a copy of this specific template and then work with that copy later on, right? So that we don't mess up the template itself, right? Because we want to use it dynamically, right? We want to use it all the time. And what this also enables us is that we can change the design or the colors or the size, whatever, right, in that template. And the next time the template is going to be used and copied, right, it will always have the most recent design changes, right? So this is also quite convenient. All right, so what I'm going to do first of all is to jump into n8n, and I'm going to look for the Google Drive node, and this is this one. And what I want to do is the very first option is to copy a file, right? So if I click on this, then this is going to be connected to my specific Google account. The resource that I want to use is the file, and the operation that I want to conduct is a copy. Now, which file do I want to copy? I'm just going to select it from here. I'm going to look for business because it's called business report, and then I'm able to actually select this very template, right, which is going to be copied. Now, the file name of the new file, which is going to be created based on that template, is something that we can use dynamically, right? So if, for instance, that I wanted to just name it based on the report title, right? So then I can just drag and drop the variable that I have just received from the LLM chain, right? And this is now actually the title, right? What I could do additionally is, for instance, to add also the date into the title if I would like to do this, right? So that it is just going to be listed within my Google Drive, right? So every week, however often this specific flow runs, I have a new report, right? And it has already the current date inside the title, right? This could also be a solution, and you can do this to your liking. I'm just going to keep it simple right now. So I'm just going to use the report title for now. And I'm going to keep this toggle active, which says that to copy it in the same folder where we also have the template, right? And this is exactly what I'm going to do. All right, so I'm going to execute this step, and let's just see what happens. And now you can see that it did output, first of all, an ID, which is going to become an important factor in a second. And then we have the name, right? And if I now jump into my Google Drive, as you can see, then you can see, and I did this a couple of times before, that this was just created as we are talking, right? So we have 1036 right now, which is exactly the last creation of that specific report, right? So that if I sort this by date modified, then you can see that this is the file that it just created. Now, if I open this, then you can see that it is obviously still the same file, right? Like the template. So nothing changed. There's no real data within this file, obviously, right? Because we haven't changed anything yet. We just created a copy, a one-to-one copy of the specific template. All right. Now, the next thing is that we actually want to replace all of these placeholders with the actual data, right? All right. So jumping back into n8n, and I'm going to close this. And then the next node that I'm going to select is actually from Google Slides itself. And what I want to do from all these selections that I have right here is to use the replace text in a representation, right? So this is pretty self-explanatory as well. So if I choose this one, then this again is connected to my Google Slides account. The resource that I want to use is a presentation. And what I want to do, the operation is going to be to replace a text. Now, what specific file do I actually want to update? You know, where do I want to conduct those replacements? Because remember, this is the file that we just created, right? So this is nothing that it wouldn't make sense to use something like a dropdown where we would statically select any file that we already have within our drive, because this file was just created, right, by our automation itself. So what would make more sense is that we are going to use the very ID from the copy file node before, right? Because what this does, it gives us the most recent ID of the specific file which was just created, right? So we have a really elegant and dynamic solution to always get the file we just created on our own, right? Or the automation rather created. And perfect. So this is exactly what we are going to do. Then the next step is that we actually want to select the text, right, or to find the text that we want to replace. So what I'm going to do is to add a text right here, and this is going to be the text to replace. And what this first of all enables me just to look for matching cases also, right, so it will adhere to lower and uppercase. And what we can also do is to use or to look for specific text on a specific slide, right? So if I open this up, then there are 4 slides, right, based on the document that I just created, and these are exactly those 4 slides that I have right here. So if for some reason that I wanted to only replace text on a specific file, right, on a specific slide, then I can use this option. But in this case, I actually want to replace the complete text. So wherever I am going to find the specific variable or the placeholder that I'm going to put in right here in a second, then I would just leave this empty, and then it is able to look through the whole document. All right, so what do I actually want to look for? The first thing that I want to replace is actually the summary, right, or the summary placeholder. And what I'm going to use for this is actually a single curly brace, and then the word summary, and then the closing single curly brace, right? Because this is the placeholder that I have right here. So it is going through the whole document of this specific Google slide, and then it is going to replace it with something. And what is this something? This something obviously will come. And I'm going to collapse the previous node, and I'm going to access the node we had before, which is our basic LLM chain, because this is where it actually generated the summary, right? The executive summary. Now you can also see why it was so important that we are able to access each and every one of those items individually, right? Because now I am actually able to drag and drop this right into the replace with field right here. So it will look for this specific placeholder, and then it will replace it with the actual value, with the actual AI summary right here. Right? And this is the same logic and the same tactic that you can use everywhere, right? So I'm just going to do the same with the according numbers that we have right here. So jumping into our new file right here, I'm going to replace these variables or placeholders like so with their according value. So let me just quickly do this. So I'm going to add another text that I want to replace. I'm going to scroll down a little. Now I'm going to actually search for spend, right? This is the placeholder from my document. And now I am selecting the Google Sheets node, right? Because this is now where this number is coming from. And I'm going to also basically drag and drop this into this field right here. Now there's one little thing that we need to be aware of, and this can lead to problems if you don't use it. This variable that we just pulled in, right? The spend variable. This has this hashtag icon right before it, if you can see. I'm going to zoom in a little, and here you can see that the variables that we get out of all of these nodes have different kinds of data types, right? And the data type that we are usually working with, or that we have worked with so far, is a text, right? And if you take a look at the date, for instance, that we received from the Google Sheets node, is actually also just text, right? And if I zoom out a little and I jump into our basic LLM chain, then you can also see that the output that the LLM chain chain generated is also just text, right? It has this T icon right before it. However, in the Google Sheets node, we also have a different kind of icon, which is a hashtag, right? Which represents just a number, right? And this can actually lead to problems if we just drag and drop this number field inside of this Google Slide replacement tool right here. So what we need to do is that we need to convert this number that we have just dragged and dropped from the previous node into text, right? And the way we do this is actually quite simple, because what I just need to do for this, and I'm going to zoom in a little again, is at the very end of this variable, and we're not going to get into too much of this right now, but you are able to work with expressions, right? We work with further code, if you will, with further functions or methods that enable you to do things, if you will, with this specific value that you have received from the previous nodes, right? So if I type in period, then this gives me a selection of multiple methods that I have access to based on the parameter that I just pulled in, right? And the one that I'm going to look for and the one that I'm going to use is called toString. And this is also quite self-explanatory, because what this does is it converts a number to a string, right? And this is exactly what I want to do and what I need to do for it not to run into an error. So what I'm going to do is just to, based on the toST that I already entered, select the according method. And now you can see that this is still green, right? There is no visual difference between the number and the text right here, but you know, from a technical standpoint, it has now, or it will be converted into text later on if we run this very node. And this is kind of important because it can lead to errors. All right, perfect. So I'm going to repeat the whole process for the remaining 3 variables that we have right here. And remember, all of these are going to be numbers, right? So I will need to be aware of this and also convert this into a string accordingly. And the way I do this is just to add text right here. Then I'm going to look for the next variable name. The next one is called clicks. So I'm just going to enter clicks, close the curly brace, and now I replace it again with the according parameter right here. And then at the very end, before the double curly braces close, I'm going to add the toString method again. And this is also giving me the value, as you can see right here. Perfect. This is what I'm going to do with the next 2 variables as well. All right, perfect. So now I have the clicks variable right here, which is going to be coming from the clicks on the left-hand side, and I've converted this into a string, and I did exactly the same with the impression variable and also with the conversion variable, right? And again, these are coming from here. So if you have named them differently, then obviously you need to look for the according value yourself. Perfect. All right, so let's close this, and let's also run this really quickly and just see if this works. So what I'm going to do is to click on this play button right here, which will just execute this very step right here. And now it did output 1 item. I'm going to open this up and let's just see what this gives us. And this is giving you a little summary of the text that was found and if it was replaced. So let's actually take a look into the result. So I'm going back into my Google Drive. Let's actually close the previous ones just so that there's no confusion. And you can see that this was just modified. I'm going to open up the file again. And now you can see that we do have our summary right here. And if I jump into the next slide, then you can see that these are now the actual values that were replaced. Perfect. So this has worked very well. Great. So we have our data right here. We have our AI analysis here. And also within our Google Drive, we also have saved that file. So the last thing that we need to do is to take care of sending that data, right? Sending that slide as a PDF via an email, right? So let's jump into n8n and do this really quickly. So what I'm going to do within n8n again is to look for Google Drive again. And the option that I want to use right now is the download a file first, right? So I'm going to select this because there's a really handy feature within the Google Drive node, which is that it is also able to convert certain types of data types into different data types, right? And first of all, this is again still connected to my Google Drive account. Obviously, the resource is a file and I want to download a file. Now, which file do I actually want to download? Now, again, I could use or select this hard-coded, right, if you will. So I could select this by hand by always having to select the according file from my dropdown right here. So again, remember that we have our KPI report, and then this is giving me the selection of all the files that have that specific name. But again, this wouldn't be dynamic, right? We have to basically interrupt the flow or take part in this flow, and this is not something that we want to do. So instead of choosing the file from a static list, right, what I want to do is to use an ID for this. And again, what ID do I want to use in this case? Obviously the same ID that I have received right earlier. Or I can also jump into the very previous node, which was the replace text in a presentation. because this again matches the specific ID that we have also received from the copy file one, right? Because this, at the end of the day, this is referring to the exact same file. So this is my choice if I want to use this kind or this ID from the copy file node or the presentation ID from the previous slides node, right? But I'm going to take the very last one. So I'm just going to drag and drop this right here. And this now will enable me, or the specific node rather, to actually reference to the specific file that we just created and that we also just updated. Right, perfect. Now, the very next thing is actually kind of important, because I need to add an option right here. And here you have an option called Google File Conversion. And if you select this and add conversion, then you can see that you can basically, depending on the incoming document that this specific node receives or is supposed to download, that you can convert it into a specific other data type, right? So if, for instance, this node or this ID would have been a Google Doc, right, then I can convert this. I can convert the data type into any of these types, right? Now, obviously, in our case, this is a Google slide, right? And I could convert this to a PowerPoint as well, right? So a native Microsoft format, right? But what I want to do is just to convert it into a PDF like so. And this is already it, right? So you can basically leave all the other fields as is, and the ones that you know is going to be the incoming data type, which in our case again is a Google slide, is going to be or needs to be selected right here. In our case, this is a PDF. Perfect. All right, so I'm going to execute the next step, and let's just see what happens. And now this is giving me the actual file, right? So if I download this, then this would be the very file that we see right here, but just in a PDF format. Perfect. And as you can also see, so besides our usual three view formats that we have access to, right? So if you want to take a look at the data, we now also have the binary view, if you will, right? So, and if I downloaded this, then this is actually giving me the specific file, but this time it is as a PDF, as I've mentioned before, right? Perfect. All right, so the very last step is then that we actually want to send this, right, as an attachment to a specific email address. So what I'm going to use for this is a Gmail node. I'm going to use the send a message action like so. And this obviously again needs to be connected to your specific Gmail account. The resource is a message. The operation is going to be sent, and then you can choose on your own where you want to send this to. I have a specific test account for this, and obviously in your case this would probably be any stakeholders that should receive this very report, right? Now, as for the subject, this could be anything, right? So you can just use the file name and then probably, add the date or something, whatever you prefer. So let's just also take the title from the report, right? So this would also be dynamic. You can also just hard code it, right? Because usually if this is something that happens on a regular basis, then, having a static subject is fine from my experience. And yeah, so the next thing is to use the message, right? So just say, hi, this is this week's report, and you can even tell them where they find it. Please find this week's report attached, right? Because this is what we're going to do. So very simple message right here. And now we actually need to add the file, right, that we have received from the previous node into that email as an attachment. And the way you do this is by selecting the add option drop down right here and use the attachment options. And now you would add an attachment, and then you have the attachment field name. Now this is not to be confused with the file name, right, which is different, because what this refers to, and you can see that there is already the default value of data. This is actually referring to the name of the output file that you have received from the download a file node, right? And if I jump back into the previous node like so, then you can see that the output name by default also is actually called data, right? So this is referring to this very name, right? And again, this is not to be confused with the file name, right? So this has nothing to do with this. As you can see, the file name of the downloaded file is still weekly marketing report, but the field name is data, right? So this is what the subsequent node within the attachment field name is referring to, right? So it's important that both of these values do match, right? So to make it easy for you, just keep the default value, and then you won't have any problems. Perfect. All right, so I am going to send this to myself. So I'm going to enter my address in a second, and then I'm going to execute the step and just see what happens. All right, so this was just sent, and let's jump into my inbox right here. And here you can now actually see that we did receive this very document, and hi, please find this week's report attached. And then we have the PDF file just like so. Perfect. So this has worked flawlessly. All right, so this is already it. So if I jump back into the n8n flow and I zoom out a little, then you can see that this was quite simple actually, right? So there's nothing special going on in that regard. And obviously you can expand this in regards to, you know, what database you would get this data from, what types of data you would get this data from, who this is going to be sent to, where this is going to be stored, right? But now you should have the knowledge of how you do this. Now, if you would like to know more about n8n and AI and how you can use this, then feel free to jump into my free Script AI school. This is where you will learn n8n in depth and AI as well, right? So we will jump into all of these fields that you can see right here. And yeah, I hope today's session was helpful. Hope to see you next time. And thanks for your attention. See ya. Bye.